Oh my
Welcome back to
God.
the show, everybody.
Yeah,
Dana and I are
we're
not
talking
not
about
today, everybody.
stress. Yeah,
Not
yeah.
today, everybody.
Today, I was telling Gwen the story about how I was pumping gas on an unusually irritable. You know, when you wake up in the morning and you're already annoyed, and then those are the mornings you drop the soap like 6 times,
Yeah.
and you're like, "Are you kidding me?" And some homeless person started to approach me, which I'm usually very kind, and I just, without even looking at him, just said no. And I think I scared him, and he just backed away slowly. And I'm just like, so we thought maybe doing an episode on stress and what it does to you, as Gwen
Yeah.
is having allergies and my forearms are breaking out in rashes that I've never had
And
before.
I like feel having like arthritic symptoms in my
And
fingers.
your fingers are swollen and hurting. Yeah, right.
You know, I know we always come back to self-awareness, right? And
Yeah,
knowing yourself and everything. And to be clear, I am not always great at catching myself
mm,
when I'm building irritability or when
yeah.
I'm just more impatient or when I'm snappier, like not as in
Hmm.
snappy fast, as in snappy, I'm going to snap your head off.
Yeah,
Snappy,
like you're irritated. Yeah, yeah.
and that's not necessarily a good place to be. I mean,
Mm.
especially when you're in relationships and or you're navigating the community right now, which is just
Yeah.
so busy
Oh
because of
my
the
God.
season.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife and I have a thing we can say to each other. We can just say, well, like we're prickly. Or if I check in, like, are you okay? And she'll just say, yeah, not really. And if she says it like that, we know it's like not each other, but we're
Yeah.
just in one of those moods. And then usually we
Yeah.
just say, is there anything I can do to help? No. And then you just kind of stay out of each other's way. Because, when you're in that space, everything bugs you. And it just made us think, as we were talking about that before we logged on, about right when you were saying that, like when you're irritable, I'm thinking, and then we have these kids, these autistic kids learning ABA therapy, and they're obviously irritable every day because they haven't learned how to navigate their life. And we're asking them to stuff it down and behave.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
And
it's crazy.
comply.
And comply. But this, yeah, the
Yeah.
sense of like, I have a colleague where I teach who does research on anger and irritability, and he'll talk about things like, have you had enough to eat? Have you slept enough? Are you having one of those days? I went to a workshop many years ago, one of these week-long bodywork workshops I would go to, and we had to have assumed names. And the first night, you tell everybody your name, you have a name tag, and what the meaning of it is for you at that point. And her name was Bohica, and it's like, just sounded like some name. She's like, I was having one of those days, and then I got in the shower and I kept dropping the soap. And like the ninth time she dropped the soap, she bent over and she could hear this voice saying to her, bend over, here it comes again. And that spells out
Oh,
Bohica. And it was sort of like her exploring that whole week was about like the world trying to do that stuff to you. And more
yeah.
specifically, how do you cope with that? Right?
Yeah.
Because things are going to come your way. I mentioned this weird skin thing I'm having on my forearms that I've never, knock on wood, I've never had skin stuff. I've had everything else under the sun, but not skin stuff. And now I'm on Zyrtec. I'm on a systemic allergy med, not to put cream on it stuff. And they're saying this is a systematic, like your whole body needs something to calm down, like the histamine right now. And then it makes me think histamine going up can be an offshoot of stress, right? If you think about, we know a lot more now about the physiology of stress,
Yeah.
regardless of the stress. Um, and if your bucket is already filled with water and it doesn't take that much more, it's going to, like your dog ate your freezer out and then your washing machine started leaking, right? That's a really bad day. So most
It's a
people could
bad
look at
day.
that and say, of course I'm going to be prickly. But we all have those days where we just start to wake up that way. we're sort of, or a bunch of things happen throughout the course of the day, or it's the holiday season or whatever, you've got things going on in your life that you're sort of feeling full a lot. And if you're not consciously doing things to lower it, or you are doing things to lower it, and no matter what you do, it seems to keep staying full. It doesn't seem like you can empty it, right? And so if you have like I have asthma, and definitely if I'm more stressed, that'll exacerbate those symptoms. So asthma isn't a stress illness, but it's exacerbated by stress. It can make it worse. And so with a lot of neurodivergence, there's a lot of conditions that are autoimmune or GI or allergic that get worse with stress. And then you can, I went through this whole period where I would gaslight myself, like I must be doing it wrong because I'm not managing, I'm still having these symptoms. I should be able to get rid of them completely, or it's my fault now that I'm not managing my stress and my asthma's worse, or this is worse, or whatever. And it's really about getting tools in your toolbox to deal with those. I also, with this thing, I have these little trigger points in my back that we couldn't figure out years and years ago. And then my doctor was finally like, oh, we're doing trigger point injections now. We put a little bit of steroid in there and some numbing. Do you want to try it? And I had this chronic, pain back there, but it was like my diaphragm felt tight and I was having a hard time just relaxing my gut. First injection, I mean, literally as I was leaving the office, I could just feel my diaphragm just like dropping. And I was like, and I thought about like acupuncture and some other things that haven't been a mainstream part of Western medicine yet. And, and I'm going to get one on Thursday. I haven't needed one in a year and a half, but I'm like, okay, so clearly as I go like this, something's going on, I'm clearly stressed. Even if it's like something you can't necessarily put your finger on, if you're sort of feeling that buzzing, it's okay to acknowledge that and say, okay, I need some help. I know I have this resource. I know I can get this trigger point injection. Let's go in and get it done. Let's go in and, take this medication to help the stupid rash on my arms, and be a little more gentle with myself about it. Right. But especially if you have a condition that can get exacerbated, and GI stuff's ripe for something like that. We know that when you're stressed short term, you get that big adrenaline dump. You get like that, like if you almost rear end someone in front of you, you get that big adrenaline dump, and then you're okay. And then your body returns to normal. When you're under chronic stress, that stays at a little bit higher level, and you get this massive cortisol dump into your system because your body thinks you're in danger. And if you do that a long enough period of time, your immune system starts to take a hit, because one of the things that happens when you get that fight or flight is your immune system just shuts down, because it's like, I'm in danger. Everything needs to go to my musculoskeletal system so I can get away from this danger. So even that slightly higher chronic stress, you're more prone to illness like flus and things like that, but you're also more prone to flipping the switch for other things like autoimmune things that may be like somewhat in remission for a while now are showing up and can stack on top of each other. And then that becomes the stress, right? It becomes this vicious cycle, like, oh crap, the rashes aren't getting better. Oh my God, what am I doing? And then that becomes something you worry about and stress about, right?
Yeah. And I think there's this really fine balance between paying attention and then over exaggerating something.
Yeah, over attuning to it.
Over attune, right? Like that's a difficult line, I think, sometimes to hit. And I think that is so individual, knowing yourself and knowing, okay, like if I think about myself, I tend to diminish and just put my head down and work through stuff. Like that's, I've always done that. I've done that. There's lots of reasons for that. And, by the time something happens, it's like, this is bad. Like it's bad because you have literally diminished it to just move on and power through. And at a certain point in time, I think the body says no more.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, we're not doing that. Down. Yeah. Like I will force you to take a moment. And so what does that mean? And, what are your signs? Like what are your particular brain or body signs that
Mhm.
things are building? For me,
Yeah.
it's irritability. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I can get really irritable, or I have a very short fuse when,
Mhm.
especially in my work, like I tend to have a very long fuse
Yeah. Yeah.
for work.
Yeah.
It's something that we really need to have in the work. And so when
And
I
it's sort of
don't have
second
any
nature
left,
now that you have that for
yeah,
that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And when and then when there's nothing left outside of work, that there's something wrong. Yeah, so
Yeah.
those are the things. But sometimes, life is so busy and you're going from one thing to another that, you haven't stopped to really
Yeah.
consider this
Yeah.
until
Yeah.
really there's some other factors that kind of pop
Yeah.
up. I think the other thing that I'm thinking about is, when a reaction feels disproportionate
Yeah.
to the moment,
Yeah.
right? Oh my gosh, like I've lost my mind and, I want to divorce my husband because he didn't take out the trash, whatever. We kind of know like there's other stuff
A little out of
happening.
proportion.
You
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
They're like,
Yeah.
that's a good, I think, sign or flag for people. It's like,
Yeah.
wow. And it's because like there's this really great meme where it's like this little creature. It's not a
Mhm.
person, but it's a creature. And it has like a big rock on its back. And it like the big rock says like past trauma. And then the
Mm.
next frame is like the big rock plus like another like maybe work stress. It's like another
Oh,
rock,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the next
Yeah.
frame is like past trauma, work stress, and like money or
Mhm.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then the next frame, they've tripped over the tiniest crack in the sidewalk and they've
Oh,
dropped it
yeah.
all and they're just bawling.
Yeah.
And the other creature says, like, what's the matter with you? Like, that's such a small deal.
Oh,
Like, why are
crack.
you
Yeah.
acting
Yeah.
this way?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just a small
Right.
crack. When there's so much that this person's carrying
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it only took that little crack for literally us to crack,
Yeah. I thought what you were going to
and
say is they were pancaked and you could barely see them, and the other person was going to say, "Are you okay?" And they were going to say, "Yeah, I'm fine."
that would be me, by the way. No, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah. I'm
hyper
good. I'm good.
independence, like I've
Yeah. Yep.
totally
Yep. Yep.
noticed like hyper independence being a result of complex trauma for
Yes.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And I think
Yeah.
that's like where I can really relate to my clients and in neurodivergence in a way, which is,
Yeah.
just how my past and how my traumatic past has really shaped
Yeah.
who I am today and why I do the things. Why am I hyper independent? Why do I
Yeah.
diminish and
Yeah.
squash my own needs? Why do I
Yeah.
fawn?
Right. Yeah.
Why,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Why do
Yep.
I do these things? The
Because
other day
the thought is that
yeah,
if you don't and you do get vulnerable, you're gonna get attacked or something bad's
squashed.
gonna happen or you're
Yeah.
gonna get squashed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you just sort of Herculeanly, hold it up. And asking for help or someone even offering help sometimes can feel
Yeah.
so much a threat to the system that you're barely holding up that someone could say, "Can I help you?" And you're like, "No," and you really do need the
Yeah.
help. And then taking the
Yeah.
help sometimes can actually make you lean into the pain more. I've seen more people really get into their feelings and their affect when they've had someone be kind to them than being mean to them. They can get into their
Right.
anger time and time again, but you try to get them into those vulnerable feelings, and those can actually be scarier, right?
Yeah.
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 So that hyper responsible and holding everything up is certainly a coping mechanism, right?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And the listening to having that awareness isn't easy to do, I guess is what I'm saying. So, it took me a really long time to learn how to do that. And I'm still, can have some things stack up and they might be new things and be like, oh, there it is. I didn't see that one coming. Right.
Yeah.
And then the question is, what do you do? Like you don't get relief immediately necessarily, right? Kind of have to just focus on what you can and wait for it to dissipate, which is frustrating as hell too. I want
Yeah.
something I can do that's like going to make a difference right now. Right.
I mean, I think that is a whole nother episode,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is that, our strategies in and of themselves aren't
Mhm.
permanent and long
Yeah.
lasting. They
Right.
need to be done over and over in conjunction with
Yeah.
other things. I mean, it's a lot of work, and I think this is where when you already have a chronically stressed out person, and I do
Mhm.
see that a lot of my neurodivergent clients have this chronic amount of stress forever. Like since,
Yeah.
since
Living in
coming
a
out of the
world
womb.
not built. Yeah.
Yeah, that it's hard to meet the environmental demands, right?
That's right.
Because of the way the world works.
Yeah.
That chronic stress, I imagine like frayed nerve endings.
Yeah.
I like an inflamed system. I mean that, you're dumping
Mhm.
cortisol chronically. I mean, we know
Yeah.
cortisol leads to a lot of inflammation in the
Yeah.
body.
And
As
tissue
a
breakdown, and you don't heal as
yes.
well. And yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, that stress management, which, I for a long time really bucked. I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
psychology isn't just about stress management. Like some people are like, oh,
Right.
it's stress management. And it's like, I guess,
Well, then
but
you
there is a
gaslit
piece to
people
it.
into you're not managing your stress, so now it's your fault. Again, there was a lot of that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Remember we were going to call that gas masking.
Gas
When we gaslight ourselves. Put the
as you're
mask on yourself.
talking,
Oh.
right. As you're talking, it's showing up on other social medias now, but it's mostly been on TikTok. And I had to look up what the character was. It's a Muppet, and it's a not a lobster, but it's a
A
giant
shrimp?
prawn. It's a shrimp, like
It
giant prawn
yeah.
Muppet. So it's got this crazy hair, a bunch of legs. It took
Is
me a
that
while to figure out what was going on. So you'll see that face on a TikTok thing, and you scroll through the pictures,
yeah.
and then there are people telling these horrible stories, like of going to the
No.
hospital. They have this thing. Everybody thinks they're faking. Blah blah blah. And I'm like, this is a weird trend. And then I realized I looked it up, and someone said it's like this trend on TikTok. It's trauma dumping, right? But it doesn't feel like, I think there's
Oh.
something about having that face with that character that it doesn't feel like the trauma dumping we've done an episode on. Like I
No.
was reading one of these, and the woman was describing how she wasn't feeling well and then was projectile vomiting. And I was laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. And it was like some of these are so funny, right? So I end up telling a story using those. And this is a true story. I think I was like a junior in high school. My oldest sister was home from college. I've talked on the show before how my mom was an alcoholic. It's like 3 a.m. We hear her raging downstairs and all this banging going downstairs. We go downstairs. Maybe she was channeling your dog. She's taking stuff out of the freezer and throwing it everywhere, just throwing stuff. And so my sister and I look at each other like, oh God. Just as I'm looking at my sister, I see something out of the corner of my eye flying towards my head, and I duck. And it's this round pie tin of these little egg rolls we had made with foil over the top. And it's like she threw it like a frisbee. As it's flying towards my head, the foil's coming off and the egg rolls are spraying out like it's a weapon or something, right? And I duck just in time to not get hit by the egg rolls. And I look at my sister, and we both just start laughing hysterically. And then that gets my mom's attention, and she's like, what are you guys doing here? We're like, what are you doing? You should just go to bed. So she says, we say, go to bed, we'll clean it up. So she goes to bed. I don't remember what happened with her, but we cleaned it up. There was stuff everywhere. We were sure we got it all. We go to bed. I get up the next morning at like 7 o'clock to go to school. My pants are in the dryer. I go downstairs to get the stuff out of the laundry room. There's an 8-pound roast sitting on the floor in the laundry room, still cold, but fully thawed. And I was like, all right, well, what do we do? That we had it for dinner.
Yeah.
And and I remember telling that story to my therapist when I was first in therapy, and I thought it was hilarious. And she's just looking at me like, that's not funny. That's not funny. But it was sort of like this idea of when you live in that stress, you have to figure out a way to cope, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it was clear that my sister and I were just like, we have to make light of this because it's ridiculous. And hey, we got a thawed roast. Let's have it for dinner. So people that haven't come from those backgrounds are mortified, but people like this trauma dumping you're seeing on TikTok, we get it. When you're laughing at something, it's like, oh, we got company in this, and it sort of helps, right? It feels better.
It feels better. And so I'm a big Muppets fan. So I feel
Yeah.
bad that I called Pepe a shrimp because he's a
It
prawn.
is the Pepe. It is Pepe. Yeah, that's
It's
what
Pepe. No, he's Pepe the king prawn.
He's a prawn. Yeah, king prawn.
He's a prawn. He's a prawn.
Yeah.
And I'm big. I mean, like Muppet Christmas Carol. I mean, like the
Oh,
Muppet Show. I mean, like.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like big for us in my family. We love the Muppets, like love the Muppets.
What's not to
and
love?
no, especially like the old variety show Muppets, like the original Muppet Show.
Yeah. I
Julie
know. I used to
Andrews on
love
the
I
Muppet Show,
used to
like,
watch
what?
that in high school and not tell anybody else that I watched it because I
Oh, it
loved
was
it so much.
amazing. Mark
Yeah.
Hamill,
Yeah. Yep.
yodeling, like what? Like, come on.
I
Like this is prime time stuff.
Right.
It's like some of my most favorite memories. And as you're talking about that, first of all, I imagined a shirt, because we have a hypothetical store, a merch
Yeah.
store. I imagined like Dana, adeptly ducking while a pie tin of egg roll shrapnel
Yeah,
was getting
yes, it's flying
distributed.
around.
I
Yeah, yeah,
mean, it
yeah,
could be
yeah, yeah.
this could be good stuff. And it's like, how do
Right?
we I think the coping though is really great. I mean, it's like this idea of how do I lighten the load
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the gravity of this
that's right.
situation.
That's right.
Um,
And that's why I think a
and
lot of
how
those things sorry, a lot of things on
yeah,
social media when people they're like these
yeah,
kinda dark like that thing you
yeah.
said, that meme where a guy is covered with a
Yeah.
rock. People can look at that and be like, "Oh,
Oh, so
yeah, I feel
related to
so
that though.
seen." Yeah, I can so
I feel
relate to that.
so real. That
Yeah.
relates to me, and I really felt like it relate. And I've been like grabbing these and just kind of, in some of my sessions, depending on who they are, I'm like, what does this mean to you? Because
Mhm,
this made
mhm.
like honestly, there was this meme, and it made me think of like it literally made me think of a client, like.
Yeah.
And I had to bring this meme to a
Oh,
session,
yeah.
and I was like,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
read this meme, and I immediately thought of you. And if it's okay with you, I want to share it and see
yeah,
just what your thoughts are.
yeah.
Man, like she started to cry because it was like, that is
Oh,
me,
yeah.
like in a nutshell. Like, and so it was like such a great way to just also reflect that I
Yes.
felt that and connected on a level that, wasn't necessarily verbal. But when I read it,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, boom, I thought of this person
It's
like
like
right away.
iconography for that
Yeah.
understanding, like in this nice little
Yeah.
package where you can understand that. Yeah, yeah. I think that's
Yeah.
why if you're my mind also is going to my last class this quarter on Saturday. One of the students brought treats for everybody. And it was,
Mm,
and he even said, it's like, I know everybody's super stressed. And it was just so sweet, like to have
yeah.
someone recognize that in each other and want to do
Yeah.
something about it. And there, even if you're totally stressed, aside from when you're super prickly, because if you and your spouse are prickly at the same time, sometimes it doesn't go well. But if
Yeah.
you know you have, company in that, or if you know you have a particular thing that's chronic that you have, like a physical thing, talking to other people that have it, it's that weird sort of club, you know. I have several students that have
Yeah.
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I'll talk with them about it. And people will be looking at us like, and we're laughing about, oh yeah, I used to be able to make my knee go backwards, and I'm paying the price
Oh,
for it now. Ha! Ha, ha. And they're like, what the hell? But it's that sort of kinship in the suffering can really
yeah.
help. So if you can't if you can't get rid of the stress, sometimes finding some holding or some sense of community for that can really be super helpful too.
Yeah, I mean, what in therapy, what do we call that? I mean, it's normalization in
Yeah. Yep.
in a group, right? In a
Yep.
specific group.
Yep.
And I think there that or the benefit of group therapy for
Oh
people
yeah.
who are
Yeah.
going through very similar things.
That's right.
It
Yeah.
kind of immediately makes me think of like groups that support victims
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Or
X, whatever
AA,
that
something
X
like
is,
that.
or
It's
AA,
yeah.
right?
It's all
These
people
types of
that are in the same
things.
boat. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And so, I think our message really about stress, and there's a lot of stress, I think around this
Hmm.
time of the year, but there's stress now these days, there's stress all the time, right?
Yeah. The world's on
And
fire.
that is,
It's
yeah,
like.
right. I know.
Mm-hmm.
Like know yourself, be kind to yourself, be good to you, right? We say this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And, don't hesitate to seek support from others
Mm-hmm.
who may also feel very similarly, or,
Yeah.
and you may not know who that is, but that can be really
Mm-hmm.
helpful. Or, do your meme therapy. I mean,
Yeah.
Dana loves her memes, memes
Yep.
are like Dana
Yep.
loves
Yep.
memes. I love that. I didn't know that I didn't know Pepe was going around. I'm going to have to look that up.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's just so awesome. I think whoever started it with those pictures, it's perfect because he's got that look like his face, like what is
Um,
happening? Yeah.
well, and he's a hilarious character
Oh, okay, I'm gonna have to
in the
do some
Muppet
more
Show as
research on
well.
Pepe. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I
Cool.
mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they all have their own roles and
Little
personalities, and it's just
personalities. Did you know that
fantastic.
Oscar the Grouch started out blue?
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's totally tangential autistic thought. I just saw this the other day,
Well,
and
because
then
you
they
went from
switched.
Muppet to Muppet. That was your connection.
Yeah, I was thinking that I read this the other day. They started out as blue. I think they were gonna make him red, but there was something with the TV at the time. The camera was gonna have a hard time with it. So they made it blue, and actually can't remember the reason they changed it to green, but the story behind it was that he got all full of garbage and then he was green, like the mold and all that, and green was better. But yeah, he did not start out as green.
And Cookie's blue. You can't have
Cookie
I
blue.
feel like you
Oh
can't,
yeah,
like,
so that
yeah,
was
like you can't have two Muppets like that. And Oscar
true.
the Grouch does need to be green.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
I can't see him any other.
Yeah.
So I mean, so the end. So I love how, by the way, this is classic Gwen and Dana. We start off with stress management and we end up with why Oscar the Grouch needs to be green.
With
You're
the Muppets,
welcome.
Yeah.
Happy New Year. Like that's all I'm gonna say. Happy New Year. Dana and I will promise that we will continue to bring this riveting content back to you.
We will talk about
in
Muppets
2025. You came for stress and we gave you Oscar the Grouch. You're welcome.
Right. Yeah, maybe we all need to be more grouchy. Let your inner grouch come out. It feels pretty good when you're in a bad mood and you let it out. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like, you know what, Dana, I like that you and Sue have a code word. Prickly.
Yeah.
You know, I think I might I might pitch this to my family with Oscar the Grouch
for sure.
because we are Muppet people. So
maybe
we'll do that.
I love it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a little bit direct. It's not very subtle at all.
You don't need to be. And when you're in that place, you need everybody to know as soon as possible. You just need people to know. Yeah.
All right, everyone. In all seriousness, be good to you and Happy New Year. We will see you in 2025. Bye.
Bye, everybody.